Okay, so as you saw by the title of today's video, let's talk about journey into afterlife, to where the dead go. Something I wrote on my Facebook page yesterday that I will read to you and comment on that, and then I'll share with you my own journey to afterlife and what I saw and what I experienced there, so I can share this with you. Yeah, so first I'll just read what I wrote yesterday. Yeah, so I once wrote, it's not important what you say, but what is said through you. And I'll explain as I read, you'll see what I mean. This is a quote from Peter Kingsley's Katafalque. Once someone has been taken into another world and given a vision of reality, the whole game of personal existence is over. In other words, it's what I've been talking about really for at least 15 years, maybe 2 decades, that the personal unconscious, your personal things, the me, what you want, the personal goals, ambitions, desire to succeed, and fame and money and the next level and all that stuff. Once you have experienced the deeper level of the human psyche, what Jung called the collective unconscious, what I call perhaps the soul, or sacred, the spirit, once you have been taken there and shown the reality that underneath all these different things that we seem to think that divide us, that underneath all this, we are really just one. They're all in us all. Humanity that looks on the surface different, but underneath all this is all the same single spirit or sacred that is embodying itself in all of us. I have this metaphor for this, that we are like plants, trees, bushes and so on, and flowers. All look different on the surface, but underneath, all rooted in the same sacred ground. So this is what I mean by this. This is what this is saying, that once you have taken, have you seen the reality, the all in us all, the person, is no longer that important. You become an envoy for the sacred, for the collective, for the all in our soul, for all of humanity. Okay, so I'll keep reading. There have never been any people who were presented with such visions for themselves. So when you're given a vision, you have to share that vision. It's not for you, it's for all of us. The primordial law states that whatever is provided in the underworld is only given so it can be carried back, unchanged, intact, to the world of the living. That's the sacred contract, signed at the beginning of time between the living and the dead being the spirit. Sometimes, we call them ancestors, but I'll show you what I mean, that it's not just ancestors. This is why, as Jung duly noted, at a specific point he no longer belonged to himself alone and no longer even had the right to do so. From then on, his life belonged to the living as well as to the dead, existed for the generality, for the sake of the whole. That's exactly right. You're no longer for your own person, for your own personal ambitions and likes and whatnot. You are an envoy for something deeper and wider for all of us. Yeah? A source of life, living in the dead. This is, okay, for the whole, yeah. And Jung himself understood that when you truly no longer live for yourself or belong to yourself, then you become, just like Christ, a source of life for others. You become a source of life for others. You become the reality. You embody the reality that underneath all this things that we are so preoccupied everyday life, there's something else, something much vaster, much older. It's eternal. And this is, and if you become an envoy, a poet, a true poet, an artist, or perhaps a shaman, mystics of old. Jung was a mystic. He had all his information from within himself, most important information from within himself. But he fought with his own ability to integrate that into his everyday life. He wanted to be a scientist first and foremost, to be approved by the scientific community, by his peers. It's a problem. So he had two personalities. He had the spirit of the times, that was his scientific ego person, outside personality, and he had spirit of the depths. This is what we're talking about, the spirit of the depths, the collective unconscious. The spirit of the dead was asking him to do this work. But he managed, but I think perhaps more modern Jung, it was perhaps the Jungians that kind of washed out his mysticism because they wanted to be only scientific. Okay? So this is what he's talking about here. Like a Christ, a source of life for others. Only then, when the personal inside a person gracefully or reluctantly gives way to what lies beyond the personal, is when one starts being able to grasp the true meaning of urgency. The nearly unbearable, burning urgency of eternity pressing into onto and right into time. Peter Kingsley, Katafolke. It's all about the finding of that most inward and deep center, at the core of which I'll show you in a moment. I've spoken about this so many times. At the core of the most inward center is, for instance, like in many cultures, there will be a sacred tree or a well or a apex of a mountain, of a sacred mountain, a cave. There are so many symbols for this. Cross is one of them as well. This is the tree on which Christ was hung up before he entered heaven, before he found that place, the most inward center of the dead, of the sacred, of the spirit. So this is, I finished the quote now. This is some of my own notes that I wrote over the years that I've included into this post. Personal self-development is not as important as you have been told. Your destiny is in the deeper and wider work of collective self-development, to establish not only a relationship but identity with your mythological level of the soul, eternity. And realize that what you dream on that level of, and what dreams the bushman of the Kalahari, the North American Indian shaman, or indeed Mary in New York or Sasha in Moscow, are all the same dreams of the single dream. Exactly, that's why my book is called Where We Dream the Single Dream. Because I talk about that throughout the whole book. That's what I talk about. That there's a deeper collective level to our soul, and this is what we have to find. Then our life changes. It's no longer personal. It's all about all of us. Yeah, my haircut's a bit rock and roll today. Okay, dream of the Moscow. Are all the same dream of the single dream, the most inward center within which lives the feminine mystery of the archetypal intuition and her cosmic tree, the soul of souls. Yeah? And I continue. If you cannot die to the narrow horizons of me, the little love of your immediate tribe, and to hell with others, the personal, and be reborn into the wider and deeper love of the collective, the we, you cannot mature, and above all, you cannot heal and be finally whole. Wholeness or spiritual rebirth, I actually posted that as well is the realization that underneath all these differences that we seem to be so keen to emphasize about ourselves, or is that religion or that religion, that country, that language, that geographical location, not the same. It is. It is simply just that, different geographical location, different skin colors, different language, different tradition, different culture. But underneath all that is something that is exactly the same for all of us. And I'll show you now how that works. It was years ago now, 2008, 2009, when I was really deeply involved in work with the archetypal symbols, with the mythological symbols. I would pick a symbol, then I would see what my intuition does with it, and I would follow the trace, intuitive trace that way, back to its source, which is within me in the center. That's something that is calling and realizing, recognizing the symbol as its own, and says, this is important. This is then it becomes a signpost, a road sign back to where it's coming from, which is within you, deep within the soul, the collective level of the psyche. So there I was working with symbols. I usually just had my laptop, and I would go into Wikipedia, pick a archetypal symbol, and at that time I had this feeling I have to have a look at the myth of origin. That is to say, the mythology of how different cultures, where they think the origin of their culture comes from. So this is called myth of origin. And so I started looking at this. So again, opened my laptop, went into Wikipedia, typed in myth of origin, and then came a list. So I just picked one. For instance, in Egypt, I started with ancient Egypt, and I followed the thread, and I went to perhaps ancient Greece, then Rome, then Celtic myth of origin. Then I would go to, for instance, maybe the Pacific Islands, and then Japan, Australia, and I would follow this thread over and over for days on end. I was just sitting and doing intuitive work, following, making connections between one and the other, following this invisible intuitive thread. And then one day, I'm just sitting there, and it hit me. Intuition started to replay this reel in my head. It hit me, I got it. That underneath all these stories, there is just really one story of this, usually that repeats itself in all these different cultures. You usually have a being that divides either into male and female, or there's already a male and a female being, and they begin to create the culture, for instance. And what I got was, we are all one. That no matter where I looked, whichever culture I looked at, whichever tradition, whichever myth, underneath all this, there was just this center out of which everything came back, to which it returned. So my intuition, I was staring into nothing. When it hit me, with this intuition hit me that we are all one. I stared into nothing like you normally do, into a wall, and this reel replays itself over and over in my imagination. Intuition is using it, and it's saying, we are one. We are one. Underneath all this, we are one. No matter which geographical location, no matter which culture, no matter which language or whatnot, underneath all this, this is just this single reality, that the spirit, the source is always the same, eternity. It starts there, and it just evolves into, it builds on that, builds its culture on that, builds its essence on that. There's the center out of which everything comes. It was not really the next day when I got that real intuitive revelation that I had the dream, but perhaps 2 or 3 days later, I kept on going like this, and working and intuitively, and following the thread in with more myth of origin. I can't remember exactly which ones, but I kept on going for 2 or 3 days, maybe longer, and eventually I had the following dream. I'm inside a boat. I'm standing at the front of the boat. The boat is sailing. It's a sailboat with a single sail. I'm the only one in the boat. on a vast ocean. It is evening, perhaps. There's still enough light to see, but it's slowly getting dark, if you like. And there I am, standing at the front of the boat, and the boat is attached to a rope, a long rope, perhaps 20, 30 meters long. And that rope is attached to a person. And this person is walking on water, this vast ocean of water. And this person is walking on a lighted up path. It lights up from underneath the water, perhaps, I don't know, 20, 30 centimeters underwater. And this person is walking on that and pulling my boat. And it wasn't very long before this, me in the boat, looking at it, standing at the front of the boat being pulled by the rope by this person. He's male. He's all dressed in white, longer hair. And I knew when I looked at him, and I thought, this is Jesus Christ. And I'll explain in a moment why. And when he pulled me, kept on pulling me, suddenly I saw there's land ahead of us, a beach. We were coming up to an island, a big island. And then suddenly we arrived there. I'm disembarking from the boat across the beach, sandy beach, onto a shore. Up above, there's already a welcome committee waiting for me. They are waiting, there's a huge group of people. They're waiting outside a gate, old ancient gate to a city. And I thought the city is Jerusalem. And the waiting committee is composed of two people at the front, an old man, a king, and his queen standing at the front. And behind them was the whole, how should I explain it? They were the court of the castle or of the palace, but they were all archetypal figures. So there was the prince, there was the princess, there was a knight, there was a monk, there was a wise old man, wise old woman, and it kept on going. So I knew that these were the archetypes, if you like, out of which we build our culture. And as I walked up, as I was walking up to them, the king and the queen came forward. And I knew I was coming home. And these people were not my family or my ancestors or anyone I knew or I know in my life. They were completely different, but I knew them before, and I was coming home. We embraced, the king and the queen embraced me, and a loud voice says, "This is where we are one, and there shouldn't be any further divisions." That's it. I remember I woke up, I wrote down the dream, and this was my experience, my direct experience of our oneness. That underneath all this divisions, the artificial divisions that we are being programmed with everyday life, there are no divisions. That there are only the building blocks, the ancients, if you like, the eternal part of us at the most inward center. Now, a word about the person that was pulling me, the psychopomp, the guide, the inner guide that was pulling me over. That was my intuition. That I was following the path to the island, to the center. Yeah. Now, because I am born a Christian, a Catholic, of course that will be taken from that mythology of Christianity. So the guide would be Jesus, but it doesn't mean that this is the Jesus or anything. It's just simply an image of intuition, a symbolic image of intuition. I have also other guides. I've had a pagan woman guide, I've had animals, I've had birds, I had a bluebird guiding me, I've had a dog that changed into a human that guided me, I had deers. So this is not my first rodeo, if you like, going over to the other side. This simply just chosen that image because when I was working with the myth of origin, one of the myths of origin for Christianity is that the Jerusalem is the center out of which our culture comes, back to which it returns. That's why the city and the old gate was outside of Jerusalem. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that this is the only what should we say, reality for the whole world, the center, that God exists only in Jerusalem. No, it's just one of the myths, and I've obviously made an impression on me when I was working on the symbols, on the myth of origin, but it's not the only one. There were lots of ones. If you understand the other mythologies as well, you will see that the journey in a boat is not for instance, a Christian or Catholic image at all. If anything, there would have been an angel that come to take you away, or something, to paradise, to Eden, to heaven. But a boat journey is more associated with the Aboriginal tales. People of the islands, for instance, ethnic people of the islands, when they journey to afterlife, they're usually journeying on a boat. Or, for instance, the North, the mythology of the Vikings and the mythology of the Anglo-Saxons is when the dead journey to afterlife, they put the dead on a boat and they burn the boat sails across, right? So that's not I want to emphasize is that this is not the only way to travel to afterlife, like the only Christian way is the only way, yeah? So that's what I want to emphasize, that's very important. Another thing I want to mention is that the story of coming home, the story of going to where the dead go, is, if some of you might be familiar with the Gnostic story of the rescue of the pearl. So the rescue of the pearl, what that story is about is that the king sends out his princess, the pearl, into the world to save the world, to help the world, but she gets lost. She gets lost in our forgetfulness, and forgets herself, what she's really like, what her purpose is there in the world, to help people. So the king again sends his son to rescue the pearl, and then to bring her home. And to me, that story I read before I made that journey to afterlife. So that made an impression on me as well. So that could be also related to this, to my journey to afterlife, to what I've experienced, to what I just shared with you. So that's important to understand. So that's my journey, one of the journeys to go to afterlife, to where the dead go. And I know from research from people like Dr. Peter Fenwick, who has worked with the dying in hospices, that the process of dying and the process of going to afterlife, like I did, experiencing it directly, are identical. There comes a guide, the guide takes you over, and you return home, as it were. There are other steps before, there are visions, there are visitors, there is light, and so on. My work was strictly incubating and just focusing on intuition to take me back there. People that are dying, the process of dying is about dropping the body. When the body dissolves, if you like, no longer important, its survival instincts are no longer important. That is to say, to hold food, to reproduce, and to hold power so that you survive. Because you know you're dying, you can let go, and then something happens. The guide comes, takes you over, and you have this experience. But the problem is that when you die, when you're dead, you cannot return and you cannot contemplate what you've experienced. So it's important to have this experience while still living, to go over to afterlife, to the underworld, and then return so you can understand, and then you can help others. You see, like Jung was saying, once he has his own experiences, he didn't live for himself anymore. He lived for others, to help others become whole. My whole work has really been about this as well. That's why there have been people complaining that I don't write anything about personal things to help them in personal development. But it's not my concern. My concern is to help you to become whole. That underneath all this, there is this reality, this eternity that is calling to us, that at least once in your life, this is true mysticism. You can go there, you can experience this, you can come back, and you can make your life whole. The two halves, the personal and the collective, are reunited. Yeah, that's what is really known as spiritual rebirth. You are dying to who you thought you were before, a separate individual, if you like, of this in this family, this in this country, this in this nation, this in this religion, and you are being reborn to being a citizen of Earth. Because everything and everyone now is your kin, because there are no others. They all belong to the same eternity. They come from there and they return into it. So that's what means by wholeness and spiritual rebirth. Yeah, identity with this deeper eternal part of yourself, of ourselves. Okay, so what do we got? Yep, that's it. We're running out of time. So that's what I wanted to talk to you today, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.